Hello, and welcome to Keep the Channel Open, a podcast featuring conversations with artists, writers, and curators. My name is Mike Sakasagawa, and this is episode 100. Today's guest is Keah Brown. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. Welcome to our 100th episode. It's a little hard to believe that we're already at 100 episodes, 100 conversations with 100 amazing, creative people. You know, I don't know if you'd asked me back at the beginning, back in 2016, if I'd get to 100, what I would have said. It would have seemed like such a huge number, an impossible number. And, you know, in a lot of ways, it still does seem like that. At the same time, I still feel like I'm just getting started and that the best is yet to come. I feel lucky past my ability to articulate it that I get to do this and that you're here with me. So I just wanted to say thank you to all 100 guests and to all of you listeners out there. Thank you. Now, in honor of the occasion, I want to hear from you what some of your favorite moments on the show have been. Me, I'm not sure I could really pick one, but I want to hear from you. Which conversation stood out to you? Which one brought you to the show or particularly resonated with you? Which one have you gone back to the most times? You can tweet at me at ChannelOpenPod using the hashtag KTCO100 or email me at podcast@keepthechanneleopen.com and let me know. Okay, so let's get to today's guest. Today on the show, I'm talking with writer Keah Brown. Keah Brown is the creator of the viral hashtag Disabled and Cute. She has a BA in journalism from the State University of New York at Fredonia. Her work has appeared in Teen Vogue, ESPNW, Harper's Bazaar, and Marie Claire UK, among other publications. Her debut essay collection, The Pretty One, was released in August 2019 by Keahs Books. So, Keah and I have been friends on Twitter for a while now, and so when I saw that she was going to be publishing an essay collection, I was, of course, really excited and happy for her, pre-ordered a copy right away. In this book, Keah writes about disability and what it means to be Black and disabled in a country that doesn't make room for bodies like hers. She talks about the power of representation, why it matters for marginalized people to be able to see people like themselves in pop culture. And she writes with astonishing honesty about both her struggles and her successes, about her friendships and family relationships, about the things she loves, and importantly, about self-love. These are all topics that I can relate to really strongly, as you'll hear in our conversation, and so the book is really meaningful to me, and I'm so happy to have Keah as my 100th guest. Now, I've put a link in the show notes to where you can purchase your own copy of The Pretty One, and I do recommend doing that. I've also put a link to Keah's website where you can find links to some of her other work, including her interview with Brie Larson, which we talked about in our conversation. Now, for subscribers to the Likewise Media Patreon campaign, Keah has added a new reading to our bonus audio archive, an excerpt from her book. That joins readings from writers including Marissa Crane, Liz Lenz, Nicole Chung, Ada Limon, Rachel Zucker, Shivani Ramlochan, and many more, plus bonus interviews with the authors of the stories from my other show, Likewise Fiction. For full access to our bonus archive, go to patreon.com/likewisemedia and subscribe at the $5 level. Once again, that's patreon.com/likewisemedia. Okay, let's get started. Here's my conversation with Keah Brown. So your book came out, which, first of all, I really enjoyed your book, so thank you very much. And actually, I've gotten a chance to share it with a bunch of my family members as well, and they've really enjoyed it. So thank you for that.
Thank you. That makes me so happy. I'm like always panicked about people. Like, they're like, I read your book, and then there's like, okay, what did you think of it? So I'm always really glad when people like it.
My sister-in-law, who lives just around the corner from us, is also disabled. She had a stroke when she was, I think, 7 or 8 years old, and I know the book was very meaningful to her, and she like borrowed my copy, and then she made her husband read it, and it was, you know,
good.
Yeah, it's been a really great experience. One thing that I'm interested in, so the book's been out a couple months now. Mm-hmm. I'm kind of interested to know what your experience of it has been, like of sort of seeing what the responses are, like what might have been the most surprising kind of responses that you were getting.
I think the most surprising one was people reading it to their younger children. Because when I wrote the book, I kind of wrote it in part for like teenagers, like, you know, freshmen in college, people older. So when I get emails like me and my kid are reading this at bedtime, I'm like, oh, that's wonderful. I would have never thought that would be a bedtime book, but I'm really glad that it is, because I do think that there's a lot that you can teach younger kids, but I didn't create it for a younger audience.
Yeah. I think there's parts of the book that are a little more accessible for younger kids and some parts that are maybe a little more challenging, but I think that's an interesting idea. It's not one that I would have considered. That's really interesting.
Yeah, I got an email from a woman. She was so sweet. It was really long. And she was like, we've been reading it, and then they discuss it. Like, so they read a chapter separately, but at the same time. And then they discuss how they felt about it. Themes. She said it's almost like homework, but it's homework that her daughter apparently enjoys. So I was like, good.
You don't want it to be work. Oh my gosh.
Right. I was like, okay, if she's enjoying it, that's great. But
So that for me brings up the question, you were saying that you hadn't really intended the book to be for, really younger children. It does sort of bring up the question for me of like who you were imagining the book to be for when you were writing it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because it was for my younger self. Like, I was thinking high school age me, freshman year, early college. I was writing essentially an apology book to that person and sort of giving my younger self the chance to be like, okay, maybe I am worthy. So I was thinking first of myself in my younger years when I was writing the book. And so that's kind of where I was at in terms of like who I wanted the audience to be, was people who were, a little younger and still trying to figure out themselves, or older and still trying to figure out themselves and figure out who they are and who they can be in the world. Because I feel like a lot of times we don't give young people, especially young women, especially young Black women, the space to be unsure of themselves and the space to say, I don't know what's going on and I don't feel good about it. So I kind of just wanted to write this book to give that space to those people.
I mean, it's really interesting. I remember when I was in high school feeling, very confused and very I was a very depressed teenager. But when I was that age, I felt so much. I don't even know if I would have been able to articulate when I was young. Like if you had asked me, do I feel pressure to have things figured out? I might have said no, but the real answer was definitely yes. I feel like.
I mean, I definitely did. I was like, oh, I need to know how things are going because everybody else seems like they do. And I think a lot of times we spend those years like looking outward to other people, and we like tell ourselves that they have it all figured out and they're not possibly feeling the things that we are. But the reality is that that's the opposite. And I think this book in part was sort of trying to tell my younger self that, but also give people the space to not know and to be comfortable in not knowing things.
I mean, I just turned 40 this year and I'm still sort of coming to grips with that kind of uncertainty.
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot of learning that people can do even later in life about that. I mean, a lot of us, our culture just isn't set up for that kind of, ambiguity. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because we live in a culture that sort of tells us, when you become an adult, then you will know. And so you're like an adult and you're looking around for the other adultier adults. And you're like, did they know? Like, can someone help me? It's like adulthood is really looking around in the room and realizing that you're the adult that you're looking to. Like, it's
that's
you.
So scary.
It's so scary. And you're like, what? But I don't know what I'm doing. I just assumed when I was a kid for sure that I always thought like, I'm going to know everything I need to know by the age of 25. And then I got to 25 and I was like, I know nothing. I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people even older than me who still haven't had that realization yet. It probably would be better if they could.
Yeah.
So, one of the things I was thinking about this book over and over in the book, throughout the book, you talk a lot about the importance and the power of representation. And that's certainly been something that, for me, like as an Asian American, for example, I didn't get to read a book featuring some of my experiences as an Asian until much later in life. And I know that a lot of the people who have read this book, I know this both from Twitter and from reviews, that a lot of your readers have expressed exactly this thing, how important it was to get to read a book like this. And I'm kind of wondering what that has meant for you, and like what that experience has been like to get to provide for other people the kind of representation that you would have liked to have when you were growing up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a sap. Like, I'm very sappy. So the idea makes me teary because
Yeah.
I never thought that I could really, truly provide that for other people. I always thought that I was going to be in search of it forever. And so to be able to give someone else that with my book is honestly, truly, in the cheesiest way, like the best gift in the world to me, because we don't have that many proper representations of disability to begin with. But to not see Black disabled people, especially Black disabled women, it's exhausting and it's hard and it sucks. So I'm really glad that people are reading the book and seeing themselves within it. And I really hope that we'll get to a place where I am not the only one, but also where I can tell more stories and give, more representation, more nuanced ways in which to tell stories.
Yeah. Well, and I know that's an important part of your your work as a journalist. A lot of it does sort of revolve around helping share stories you're sharing stories of a lot of different kinds of people. Like, for example, you had that feature with Brie Larson, but you also do a lot of writing about the disabled community and about other, marginalized people. And I mean, so this book seems to fit right in with sort of that project, but I'm not sure if that's how you feel about it.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, what happens a lot is people often don't think I can do anything else. And so I'm very clear, like, I can do other things. It's just about opportunity. Mm-hmm. So when I did do that piece with Brie, I was like, look what I can do. I'm not talking specifically about disability, but look how good this is, mm-hmm. Like I just want people to realize that, yeah, I can do disability work and I can do it well, but I also have interests outside of it. And when I was working at Cliché Magazine, it's a fashion and entertainment digital magazine, I did a lot of work with celebrities and profiles and reviews, and a lot of that work wasn't really recognized, I think, in the grand scheme of my career. But I hoped with the book that I could do all things. So that's why I wrote a essay about emotions and music and pop culture, just to show how ingrained they are within me and thus in my career. So my hope is that the book does lend itself to the work that I do about representation and disability, but also that it lends itself to the work that I want to do that's not just about disability.
Yeah. If you don't mind, I actually wanted to talk a little bit about that interview with Brie Larson that you did, because I just actually really love talking shop with other interviewers.
I do too.
One of the things that I really found interesting about that interview was, I think more than just about any other interview I've ever read, audio interviews are sort of a different beast, I find, but like with print interviews, I feel like they don't usually seem like a conversation, but that one really felt like two people just talking to each other. And I found that so fascinating. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, first of all, because I love those kinds of interviews too, because I know how hard it can be to do a celebrity profile where, one person is super famous and then you just kind of lose the other person talking to them. Mm-hmm. So I was very strategic about the ways that I asked Brie questions and when I did it. So they flew me out to LA, and we did our interview at the Tower Bar, and I just was very open with her. I was like, listen, I want to know what makes you who you are. And so these questions are a way for me to figure out who you are, but also tell the world, but not give them more than they need to know.
Right.
And I think what helped is that we were friendly on Twitter first. So we had conversations privately. So there was like a easier rapport between the two of us. And for me, it was just like, I want to not be too serious, but I want people to take this seriously.
Right.
And I was like, I don't want to ask her what she's always being asked. You know, how was it to be in the suit? What was your sort of health regimen to get ready for Captain Marvel? I was like, I don't care about that. I think that oftentimes we focus so much on like body and the way that young actresses look.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's not important to me. So I'm not going to ask you about that. And we made a couple of jokes about it, but I was just more curious about who she is as an actress, but how that impacts who she is as a person. And I liked a lot of the work that she did as an activist that I had seen on Twitter, so I wanted to talk to her about that. I just didn't want to do the run-of-the-mill, hey, here's your movie that's coming out. Like, let's talk about that and let's, you know, scrape the surface of a real conversation. I really wanted us to have a full conversation about the importance of privilege and power and what it means to be where she is and also know what it's like to not have those things. So I want to talk about money and jean jackets. I really wanted it to feel like a conversation you were having or you were peeking in on with two people who respect each other but want to know more about each other. And that's kind of how I approached it.
Do you find that you have a way that you approach an interview, like a sort of habit or like a routine for when you're preparing for an interview, or is like each one kind of its own thing?
Oh, no, I have a total routine. So if I'm doing a phone interview, I write the questions out by hand so that I'm not looking at a screen while I ask the questions. I'm a very big researcher when it comes to interviews. So there's odds are maybe twice the questions that I have that like over the ones that they approve. Like when I scheduled for the Bree interview, I had 38 questions prepared. I sent in 20 to the magazine for approval, but I only ended up asking her like 14 of them. So I over prepare for like every interview just because I think that it allows me to calm down about it, especially if it's somebody that I really admire. Like when I interviewed Roxanne Gay for Harper's Bazaar, I had like some odd 40 questions. And I really only asked her like 12. But I was so excited and I was like, I need to calm down about it. So I just kept thinking of questions and I did research a bunch. And so I try to over prepare, but let the conversation go wherever it's supposed to go and not stress myself out about answering questions in order and like hitting certain things. It's like, as long as I'm getting to a beginning, middle, and end point, I'm good. But I have to like stress out and have a whole bunch of questions first to get there. Yeah.
Finding that balance between preparing, but also being sort of spontaneous in the moment. I find that is sort of the real trick. I think people who do a lot of interviews have sort of their sort of method for approaching it, but I'm always just really interested to hear how everybody else does it.
Yeah. I mean, it's really just panic, do it, and then like breathe a sigh of relief when it's done.
My process is usually panic, do it, panic again, edit it, panic a little bit more, and then release it, and I'm good.
Isn't editing the worst? I hate editing so much. I didn't hate it for the book, but I loathe it when it comes to like freelance pieces because it just feels like everything is a darling and I'm cutting and I'm killing them all.
Yeah.
Like I'm like, I want to keep that. And they're like, well, but do you have a reason? No, not really. I just want to keep it. Like I don't want anything to change.
Yeah. So to sort of come back to the book, another thing that I thought was really interesting about the book was the way that you sort of talk about intersectionality in the book, especially the ways that you talk about, you know, because like you as a Black disabled woman are marginalized along multiple axes. And so you belong to these these different communities that don't always, there's not always solidarity between them, right? And I thought the way that you talked about that was really interesting. So I'm wondering if we could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because it's a double-edged sword, kind of. You find yourself within these communities searching for a place to belong, but sometimes you only find that certain people see you, even in those spaces where it should be known how it feels to be ignored or invisible. It's like, I think I talk about it in the book, the bigger picture, I think is often the catalyst to the other communities not embracing each other or ignoring certain aspects of people. And it's frustrating because I'm never not black. Yeah. I'm never not a woman, and I'm never not disabled. But a lot of times you find that people are asking you to choose one over the other. And I get tired of it. And I'm like, that's not what I'm going to do. Yeah. I'm over that.
It is really frustrating for me too. Like, sometimes I will see members of the Asian American community doing things like, whether it might be like there's a lot of misogyny in the Asian American community that happens, or, where there can be a lot of anti-blackness. And I'm just like, look, we know how this feels. We know how it feels to be excluded and how it feels to be, pushed down. Like, why would we ever want to do this to other people? And yet it still happens so much. It's one of the most frustrating things that I ever experienced, I feel like,
Me too. I think that you just want people to do better and know better, but sometimes they don't, or they don't even care to try.
Yeah.
I think that people see certain things as sort of jokes and like not that serious, but those are people's really lived realities. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes we ignore the fact that people are humans. And that's why we are where we are, because we don't see the humanity in everyone. We only see it in the people that we have deemed okay. And that's not to say that, like, we need to see humanity in racists and homophobes or ableist people that are trash. Like, we don't need to see their humanity. We just need to see each other's so that we can avoid piling on top of people who are already marginalized.
Yeah.
And who we already know when we already know that we are marginalized.
I mean, even that thing, that word you use, like jokes, I mean, it's like such a thing where it's like we might get, and I see this happen with Asian Americans all the time, where we might get like really offended about something, and rightfully so, right? When it's about Asian people, but we, if it's about some other community, we're just like, we might make those jokes ourselves, and it's like, come on.
Yeah. I feel the exact same way. I'm like, all right, but you wouldn't laugh if the shoe was on the other foot.
Right.
So there's no need for you to laugh in this instance. Like, people are always like, it's not that deep, but it really is that deep.
Yeah.
In the grand scheme of things, like, it really is that deep.
Yeah, it is. It really is. Another thing that I really found remarkable about this book, and I hope this is okay to talk about, if it's not, then just let me know. But, one of the things in both, in a couple of essays in particular, in Love You Mean It and in To See and Be Seen, you're very open and honest and vulnerable about the ways that, like, you're not perfect either. That, like, there are times when you've been the bad one. There's this quote in To See and Be Seen where you say, sometimes you can be the toxic person in someone's life, even in your quest to be seen and understood, and you can hurt someone in your quest to heal yourself. And I find that impulse to, wrestle with, like, how are the ways that I've also been a problem is such an important thing. It's something I try to spend a lot of my own time on with myself, but I feel like it's kind of rare, and often, especially in memoir, there can be this impulse to try and make yourself look as good as possible, Mm-hmm. And the fact that you are really being open and honest about, both your good sides and about the things that you could have done better on, I found that pretty remarkable.
Well, thank you. I mean, that was intentional, obviously, because I didn't want people to think, oh, this girl has everything figured out. Like, her life must be perfect now. And it's like, no, I am still a messy human. And I think that there's nothing wrong with admitting that you are not perfect. And so for me, a lot of repairing those relationships and trying to be a better person could only be possible if I had admitted that I was once a terrible person, once a really bad person, and once a person who didn't listen to other people and didn't care about how they felt because I was so consumed with my own feelings and my own problems. I really wanted to talk about it specifically in the book just to give people the chance to express their own failings and their own sort of bad moments where they were really bad. I wanted people to be able to reflect on their own experiences and realize that we're not always the hero in everyone's stories. Sometimes we can really hurt people, and there's no excuse for it, but we can be better because of it.
I mean, I really feel like so many of the problems that we're facing in the world, like even big political problems like climate change, like a lot of it just comes down to people not being willing to be uncomfortable, and to like look at, well, maybe I'm part of the problem,
Right.
So seeing
no one likes to be called out and told that sort of truth, but it's such a necessary thing, I think.
It is. It really is. But it's sort of depressingly rare,
Yeah. No, it really is. I think people get really defensive when you say like, hey, you hurt me, or hey, you did this thing that really sucked. They're like, well, I didn't know about it. Like, if I upset you, my bad. There's always caveats with it. And I think we have to get to a place where we can stop doing that and just admit when we're at fault, because, like when I did that in the book, I felt like it was very freeing for me. I didn't have to hold on to my own mistakes and my own past bad behaviors. I was able to like let them go because I talked about them publicly and admitted that I wasn't this, cherry girl who was always very happy and always very kind to people.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's something that's often overlooked, is how freeing that can be. It can really be taking a weight off of yourself to not have to stick up for the bad things that you did in the past.
Yeah. Right. Because then you just don't have to worry about it, and you can just be a better person without having to lug around who you once were to do it. Guilt is so heavy. Guilt is like the heaviest baggage you can carry. And I think that you're better off when you at least can forgive yourself and vow to be a better person, because people don't owe you forgiveness. And I think sometimes that we forget that, because we think that if we're sorry, people should just automatically forgive us, but that's not how it works.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's a very hard thing. And I mean, it took me a long time to learn it, and thank God for therapy, because that's how I got here, because I was just like, I'm not doing anything wrong. Everybody else is wrong. And my therapist in college was like, oh, sweet summer child, no. Like, that's not how that works.
I agree. I am a big fan of therapy. I wish everybody could have the opportunity to go to therapy. Of course, some people are unfortunately not open to it, and it's like they're not going to do the work for you.
Right. Agreed.
Yeah. So another thing that I was thinking a lot about, so now this is going to be the third episode in a row that I've brought this thing up. So,
I love that.
I just can't stop thinking about it. So like a couple of episodes ago, I was talking with Liz Lenz.
I listened. I loved that one. It was really good.
Thank you. And she had this piece that she wrote for Time magazine that was called "How Many Personal Stories Must Women Share to Convince Others of Their Humanity?" And I talked with her about that. And then I also, the episode before this, which at the time of we're talking, I haven't released it yet, but I was talking with a poet named Marissa Crane. It's something that I just cannot get away from thinking about, this thing where, like, for me, whether it's Twitter or in my writing, a lot of what I do is talking about my own pain and my own trauma. And I do that really on purpose because I want people to see that side of me. Mm-hmm. And I do feel like as a reader, a lot of times I might look at other people's writing in that vein, and it really can open a lot up for me in terms of understanding what other people are going through. And so I do think it's really, really effective at building empathy across difference. But I can't get away from this question of like, okay, maybe it is very effective at building empathy, but does that mean it's my responsibility to do that, And I was sort of wondering, because the book that you wrote, people who have similar experiences to you are going to find it really wonderful in that sense. But I think it also has a lot of ability to speak to people who have different experiences from you. And, hopefully they might be able to learn something from it. But I just, that whole thing about like, people need to be educated. They're probably not going to educate themselves, but it also seems like a lot to ask anybody to educate anybody,
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me, a lot of my early work was very steeped in trauma and very steeped in like, look at all these bad things that are happening to me and like that have happened to me and like feel sorry for me because I feel sorry for me. But it wasn't until I started looking at my work in the lens of looking outward more and trying to give people a reason to care is that I realized that I can tell the stories I want to and be vulnerable and honest when I want to, but I don't have to give everyone everything just to be a writer. Very early on, I was telling whatever. I was like, here's this. This is basically a diary entry. There's no real point to it, I guess, but here are my emotions on this page and here's why they matter to me. But I think I became a better writer when I started thinking about what's the bigger thing here that I can connect to so that people outside of me can learn something. I'm a person who believes that it's okay to teach people things, but not that I have to do it. So it's about when I want to do it and when I see fit to do it. So for me, the book was really a place for me to say, you know what, people are coming to this for the first time. Some of these readers have never known a person with a disability or have never read a person with a disability. So it was my job to teach sort of like the rudimentary words and sort of phrases and the sort of 101 of disability is what one reviewer called it. She wasn't happy. But
how did that feel when that person said that?
It sucked at first because I was like, we all have to start somewhere. We don't like come into the world knowing everything. But I was hurt by it because I was like, what's wrong with teaching people the basics? Because the basics are where you start. And I just think that the person didn't necessarily understand what I was trying to do with the book as a whole because she said she felt like my story was so different from hers. And I think that's just the reality of books. We don't go just to books to see our exact lived experiences. We go to figure out, other worlds and other people and see how they live. And so for me, I was very adamant when planning the book that I would teach people, the basics, but also give them reason to expand their own education. Because I'm not a teacher at the end of the day. I can only do so much. I can teach you things, but I don't think that makes me a teacher. I'm not responsible for everybody's full education. I just want to give people a place to start and go from there.
Yeah. Well, why don't we take a quick little break and then we'll come back and do the second segment.
Okay.
So for the second segment, I always invite the guest to bring a topic of their own, which could be whatever you'd like to talk about, whatever happens to be on your mind. So what would you like to talk about today?
I would like to talk about the 24-hour news cycle.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I want to talk about the 24-hour news cycle.
Especially right now, right?
Yeah. I mean, woo.
It is a lot.
It's a lot. And I think that people, it's like you're getting the same news regurgitated back to you. And me, even as a journalist, I'm like, all right, I need a second to be away from this because it's a lot of panic, but we're not going to do anything about it. We're just going to keep panicking and being like, wow, this isn't my America. And it's like, yes, it is. And that's something we need to fix it instead of just being like, this really sucks. And getting excited when somebody rolls their eyes or claps funny or stands up in a sea of white men, and we're supposed to laud these people for doing their jobs. But I get frustrated because nobody's actually doing anything.
Yeah.
And so I find that like when I'm watching, the news or I'm like digesting it in some way on social media, I'm just waiting for someone to say, and here's what we're going to do about it. Here's how this is going to go. Like everybody was talking this morning about Nancy Pelosi standing up in that picture with everybody in the White House and like asserting herself and whatever. But I think that that's good. I think that that's absolutely necessary. But I find that we're not having a more nuanced conversation about it. Like, how many women of color did Nancy, like, did Nancy have to bypass to get there? And why aren't we talking about race when we talk about gender discrimination? So I find that, like, with the 24-hour news cycle, we see these things that are small wins, but we never talk about how those wins could have then been bigger or what we need to do to actually get these people out of the White House.
Yeah. I mean, that's something that's on my mind a lot. You probably know I'm, fairly involved with political activism for the last couple of years. So the other thing too is that, I feel like because in my role as an activist, I have to, I'm trying to organize people. I'm trying to get people moving in a direction. I'm trying to build awareness. I'm trying to do a lot of these things. A lot of the work that I do is about getting people to have regular contact with their elected officials. And in order to do that, you have to give them a reason to, right? And
right.
So me as the organizer trying to get that going, like, I feel like I have to be very up on top of what is happening in the world. Mm-hmm. And right now it is just like, there is no time at all for me to think about or digest anything. It's just like one thing right after the other with no breather in between.
None.
It's like,
none at all.
Yeah. It's completely overwhelming,
And it's hard to take care of yourself in the midst of it too, because you're like, I need to take a break, but I can't because I have to, think about writing about something like this, or I have to think about organizing people, or I have to think about the fact that this is a thing that could negatively impact me. So I have to know what's happening. But I find that I'm better as a journalist and a writer specifically when I take breaks. And I don't focus solely on the 24-hour news cycle.
Yeah, it's a hard thing for me, and especially, it feels like for me a lot of times, anytime I'm working on one thing, and I have a lot of things that I'm trying to work on, like I've got 2 podcasts now, and I'm also trying to do activism, and I'm also trying to be a good parent and a good husband, and also I have a day job. And anytime I'm working on any one of those things, it feels all I can think about is how much I'm neglecting every other thing, which also feels important and urgent. Mm-hmm. To say nothing of the idea of just even getting enough sleep.
Right. Oh my God, sleep. I miss it so much.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of us, we know how important it is to take breaks and to spend time on self-care, but it can be really hard it can be easy to know that, but hard to feel it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And to actually do it, really. I find that I'm better when I'm doing multiple things at once too, but then I always feel guilty if like a certain time passes and the thing still isn't done. Mm. And then I like not even like deadline things. Like I'm doing things that don't have deadlines, but I'm putting self-imposed deadlines on them. Mm. And so I get so disappointed in myself when I'm not, like when those days come and it's not done, or when I have days where I'm not writing.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my God, what are you doing? And then I have to tell myself, like, you don't have to write every day to be a writer. You just have to write when you can. Yeah. And as often as you can.
That's one of those things too that, and I think you talked about this in the book. I know you've talked about this extensively on Twitter about how ableist it is to have this expectation of always being at work, Like that if you're not writing every day, like that, there is that thing that goes around, like if you really want to be a real writer, you got to be writing every day. You got to be committed to it or whatever. And then there's that dreaded word of like, don't be lazy, right?
Right. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, on this tour for the book, I spoke to 2 sets of students in separate places. So I spoke to students in Chicago and I spoke to students in LA. And I told them, like, you can love writing very much. And it still is work. I also hate that phrase where it's like, do something you love and you'll never work a day in your life. Like, no, you're still going to work. It's still going to be work. And some days it's going to suck.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as doing what you love and that never being work. If you don't care about it, it's not work. But if you care about it, then it's work.
Yeah.
So I told them, people tell you all the time, you have to write every single day. And if you're not writing every single day, you're, terrible or the worst. And I told them, listen, sometimes I can't write. Sometimes my body aches. I pulled a muscle, my hamstring, my fingers hurt. That's just the reality of disability. But I also think that when we tell people, rise and grind, you can sleep when you're dead, blah, 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 we're pushing people past limits that they should never be pushed past. And we're sort of championing capitalism in a way that is so dangerous to the world we live in, because you should be able to rest and you should be able to take time to just do nothing. And that's why, I really like the essay in the book about chairs, because we don't think about the need for accessibility and the need to rest. Our bodies can't always go, go, go. It's ridiculous to think that someone is less than because they're not doing the thing that you do every single day without pause or without taking time for themselves or taking time to say, no, today I'm just going to watch romantic comedies all day, or today I'm just going to work from my phone, or today I'm not going to work at all. I think we have to really stop behaving as though the only valuable thing a human being can be is a person who works hard every single day without any sort of rest. And I do think that rest is very much a privilege, but I do think that it's something that we should be providing people with more of, is the chance to rest.
Absolutely. And I think that there's too, even just the way that we might talk about these things, people will have this attitude of like, you need to do everything you can kind of thing, right? And you need to give it 100% all the time. I feel like there's a way that people could read your chair's essay, for example, right? And say, oh, well, she's disabled, so that's what she needs kind of thing. But that's like super ableist too, right?
It's so ableist.
And really just the way that like by normalizing this idea of working all the time, nobody can do that. It's not just disabled people that can't do that. It's like nobody can do that.
Right. And people are running themselves into the ground trying to achieve this sort of inachievable work ethic. It's not about disability. It's not just about disability. It's about the fact that you can't live like that. It's not sustainable. You shouldn't want to be a person who doesn't know who they are outside of what they're providing to our capitalist society. Yeah.
And this is something that's been very difficult for me as an Asian person, like as a Japanese person, you really do sort of get raised to be like, your value is in being a worker,
Yeah.
And I know that's not just Japanese people, but I feel like, certainly that was like something that was impressed upon me by my whole family. Like, this is what it means to be Japanese. If you want to be a good Japanese, then you work hard.
Yeah. And it's like too, especially in Black families, it's like, we know that we have to work twice as hard for half as much.
Yeah.
And so for me, getting to a place where I felt like sometimes I'm not giving you 150%. Sometimes I'm giving you 80%. Sometimes you're getting 75%. And it's not because I don't care. It's because sometimes my body doesn't allow me to give you 150%. And sometimes it's my brain that's like, no, today we're going to be sad. And you're going to have to deal with it.
Yeah.
And so you're not going to get 150% from me. You're going to get what I give you, and hopefully that's enough.
Yeah. It ruins people's health.
It does. Aside from disability, so many people end up sick or overrun or having heart attacks that are brought on by stress, or having all these health issues that are brought on because they don't know when to stop, and they're not sleeping, and they're not eating enough, and they're not doing all the things that a body actually needs because they're so desperate to prove that they can do it all.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, you got the people in like the super high offices not working nearly as hard as the people underneath them.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's just infuriating, you know, and
isn't it?
It is. It starts so early too. Like, you know, my oldest is in sixth grade and my youngest is, in kindergarten this year. And from time to time they will, you know, I have to wake them up before the sun comes up in order to get to school on time. And sometimes they're just like, why do we have to get up so early? Why? This seems unreasonable for children. I'm like, you know what? It seems unreasonable for adults too.
Right. You're like, listen.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought about that the other day because there was something where they were trying to pass, I think it was in California actually. They were trying to pass a law where kids don't have to get up before 8:30.
They did pass it, actually. They did.
They did pass it.
Yeah, and it was signed into law earlier this week. The problem is, I saw a headline. I didn't actually read the article, but I saw a headline from the local newspaper editorial board wrote a thing that was saying, that's great. Now we need to also change work times so that they don't start so early, because it's like, well, yeah, there's so much research showing that kids shouldn't have to get up so early and that it's bad for their health. It's bad for their learning. But it's also like, you know, a lot of families these days have, you know, both parents working, or maybe they're a single parent family and the parent has to work. And it's like, if that parent has to get to their job by, you know, 6:30 or 7 in the morning, then like their kids have to get up even if they're not starting school.
Right.
Yeah.
That's so true. I never thought about that, but that's very true. The idea that you have to be up and going, you know, like I have family members who have to wake up at 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning just to get to work on time. And I'm like, that's so unfair. Like that is so wild to me, specifically because the kids become adults who then have to do that. So it's like we should absolutely care just as much about the adults' work times as much as we care about the kids. I agree.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a question that I like to close with, and that is, if there is a piece of art or literature or creativity in some form that you've experienced recently that meant something to you.
Oh my gosh, there's so much. We're very lucky in that we follow really talented people on Twitter.
Oh yeah.
I've been reading Brandon Taylor's book.
Oh my God, isn't it so great?
It's so good. He makes me so angry. Like, how dare you be that talented? It is so annoying. Like, how dare you?
Yeah. Oh man, it is so good.
He's taking over. Like, and I just can't wait to watch it. Oh, I'm going to be such a proud parent when the book comes out into the world. Yeah. But it's so good, and he's so immensely talented, and it's just beautiful to watch.
Yeah, it really is. I'm really, I mean, I will let you in, and I guess I'll let all the listeners in as well, but I am working on having him back on the show to talk about the book, and I'm really looking forward to it because the book is so great.
It's so good. He's legendary. Like, I'm so proud of him. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I told him years ago when he was still swearing up and down that he was never going to write a novel, and I said, "Look, man, I'm just going to say you're going to be on like the National Book Award shortlist before you know it." So.
Oh, absolutely. I remember him being like, I haven't even sold a book yet. And I was like, oh, you're going to sell 2 books. And I was like, then when he did, I was like, what did I tell you? I told you already that you were going to sell them. And here we are. It's just so good. And I'm so proud of him. And like, I've been seeing a lot of good TV lately that I find sort of, inspiring and done really well. And I'm really happy about that because I think TV doesn't get a good rap. Sometimes. A lot of times people are like, if you're not reading X, Y, and Z person, you're not a real writer. And if you care about TV and film, you're not a real writer, blah, blah, blah. But I'm one of those people where it's like, yes, I'm going to write this thing and it's going to be good because I very much believe in my work. But I'm also going to turn on the CW and watch the Charmed reboot, which is really good, by the way. And that's just going to be it. I feel like I'm not ever going to be one of those maybe sort of intellectual writers. I think I was so desperate at first for people to like take me seriously. And I'm still desperate for that. But I also recognize that I'm never going to be that writer that I think is very good with like pretty words and can craft like a really good, smart sentence. I'm more of a like, here's this piece of vulnerability and here's this way that you can connect to my work without thinking that I'll ever be able to be a kind of writer like Brandon is.
Well, I mean, I think you might be selling yourself a little bit short here. but I mean, also, like, I think writers who shit on television and movies are just sort of, you know, I think that brand of intellectualism is kind of overrated. Because there's so much you can learn about storytelling from looking at other forms, you know, other art forms. It's like.
Right. And it's like, where's your joy? What do you do when you're not writing? Like, what do you do?
Yeah.
Do you just read hoity-toity books? Like, no, I don't have time for that. I'm a person who likes to consume all things. I love pop culture.
Yeah.
So I am going to write and I'm also going to read, but I'm also going to watch what I want to watch.
Yeah, definitely.
Which I guess doesn't really answer your question, but I wanted to add that in. I was like, I feel like I need to say that.
No, it did. Well, you did, right? You said the Charmed reboot is good. So
it's so good. I love it. And I like, there's a show on ABC. It's called Almost Family. That's good. I just finished Raising Dion. I really liked Raising Dion. That's on Netflix.
Okay.
I highly recommend that one.
All right. Well, so thank you so much for talking with me. Thank you for your recommendations. I really had a good time talking with you. Thank you.
This was great.
Okay, so as I mentioned at the top of the show, you can find links in the show notes to where you can purchase a copy of The Pretty One. Do check that out. And that is our show. You can find me and the show on Twitter and Instagram at ChannelOpenPod, on Facebook at facebook.com/keepthechannelopen. And for all your questions and comments, and don't forget to send me those favorite episodes, you can reach me via email at podcast@keepthechannelOpen.com. Sign up for the KTCO newsletter by going to keepthechanneleopen.com/connect, and every other week you'll get updates about the show as well as a curated list of poems, essays, art, and more from around the web. And if you'd like to support the show, you can make a pledge to our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/likewisemedia. Our theme music is by Poddington Bear. You can find more of his music available for licensing at soundofpicture.com. Check out my other show, Likewise Fiction, at likewisefiction.com or wherever you get your podcasts. So far, we've had stories from Alvin Park and Celeste Ng, and coming up on November 11th, I'll be reading the story Crow's Eye by Sarah Hollowell. Keep the Channel Open will be on hiatus for the rest of the year, but for the rest of 2019, I am going to be resharing some great conversations from the show's archive, starting with my 2018 conversation with poet Ada Limon. That will air on November 20th, so be sure to come back for that. And until then, remember, keep the channel open.